today on the next part for the Colm Murphy videos, I want to talk about things of when I mentioned he plays simplistically and with regularity. And what I mean by that, to give you an example of both, and maybe should I show it with something else? I'll show you a bunch of ways. I had to upgrade the size of the drum because it makes more sense. He plays larger drums anyway. Okay, simplicity. Let's just pick a set pattern that we all kind of know and have heard it 1,000 times. What have we got? The 4 count. Simplicity. I'll give you an example of what's not simple. So simple over, say, of this 4 beat of 1, 2, 3, 4. I also really don't like using long tippers on this drum, but the point is, that's not simplistic. That's complicated with a lot of embellishment. Something that's closer to his playing would be something more along the lines of this. Way less embellishment and way more emphasis is on those key striking points, rather than trying to be really too embellishing over certain key points in the measures. Instead, think of it as he's a master. Mr. Murphy, Colm Murphy, is a master of effective, simplistic playing. Very simple to Johnny Ringo. Johnny Ringo tends to keep going. Variation on the back. Colm Murphy doesn't do that. Again, he would be playing way up here. And again, this is too big for my reach to do that. He's way up here, playing on it, and again, my apologies because I don't have anything to grab on. That's the first thing of keeping it regular, but it's regular and simplistic. Bringing it out, he's going in, out on those accent hits. And I'm so used to the whole up here, but like that. And I know in some videos he'll be playing in a jig set. Or he'll be getting into something in some sort of roll and he's hitting rim shots off the front. I'm not used to doing this because I'm usually doing rim shots off the bottom or back. Again, I'm not generally practiced in that because it's so opposite to what I do. But as he's going through the permutations of a piece, he's doing the excellence of the basics of what makes ballroom playing so unique, and that when it follows a melody set and you're using, say, either a motor rhythm maybe perhaps it's following the patterns and accents of the melody. That sort of thing. Or however, he keeps it simple without overdoing it. And that's a problem that a lot of players do, is they overdo stuff. And I find when I'm trying to learn a new bit and I get the basics of it, and then I try to throw my own bit of stuff into it, I always tend to find that I'm over embellishing. And that's just because I happen to be more of that sort of a player. But on the opposite side of it, too much is too much. And when you listen to Colm Murphy play, it's never too much. It's actually a beautiful amount of just enough to work with the session that he's playing in, or with the other people that he's playing with. So that simplicity of playing works quite well. So if I was going to do a jig bit to it, so let me see if I can do an improvisation on a jig bit of how I would emulate it is his style of playing. Sorry, I'm not going to be doing the squeeze from the front because I literally physically cannot grab the front of my 18-inch drum. So let's just get a jig beat going, and I'll see if I can try to emulate some of it. Now, what I'm going to be doing in some of this is some of the other stuff that he does, because we're often used to playing open tones, closed tones, chokes, like that. Apropos some of the Joni Ringo stuff, you get sort of the pressing in and out on the skin. Okay, which he does a lot at the front from here, and again, I'm less so. So you're getting a lot of that as well. So that's a lot of similar stuff that he would be playing. And then there's keeping it regular. And regular is that he always comes back to a basic pattern set that he will embellish a little bit around it. So in that jig bit, that's the basic, but that's not the hook that I'm using. This is it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then variations. Doesn't stray very far from that. And in a session, that's almost the most useful thing to use, I find, because the piece of music that you're playing tends to have this sort of signature set of accents that seem to naturally appear. And if you're trying to not John Joe Kelly it and sometimes play on the offbeats, and you're just trying to keep it simple, like Colm Murphy, you accent those. Those are the things that you don't leave particularly. You kind of stay on those. Now, flourishes out from that, they take up maybe about 20% of that extra time, but they're not massive differences. They're fairly straightforward, relatively simple to execute, and they keep the flow going. So let's keep with that again. not a whole lot of heavy variation with regards to where the accents are going. It's more so about where you can put the accents and how you can transform those. So if I'm going, and maybe in the case of this particular piece of music, I choose to take all the accent bits on a flat hit. So you can see my hand, it's right here. I'm going to use that as the main area to strike. And then everywhere around that, I'm going to have variations of it. So So that's what I mean. Even though he's doing variations of stuff, he brings it back and keeps it regular. And the variations he's doing are not very complex. Now, a quick disclaimer about this. I don't think I've ever played any of the drums like his, for example. You know, I'm using a very sort of postmodern take on this. I'm also using a tipper, and I don't have any of the ball end tippers. I don't particularly like the ball end tippers. Like those ones that you see him often using, the dog bone ones with the perfectly round spherical ends. Unfortunately, I don't have anything like that, so my sound is not even going to come close to some of the clarity of that. I think that has more to do with who manufactured the drums. This being a Hedvig shack, it has a particular sound to some of the Charlie Burns stuff, maybe not quite, but at the same time, it's not like the ones he's playing. So there's going to be a ton of sound variation. So I'm strictly looking more so at the general idea of the technique. With regards to embellishment and whatnot, I would, again, call it a very reserved set of embellishment. I would say following what flute players would be doing, following the piper would be a great way. Following pipers and flute players would be very good because you can sort of flutter and dance with what they're playing along with what you're playing. I would not generally follow, if there's a guitarist or a mandolin player or a bouzouki player, not following them in the same regard. I would stick to following more so the accents on the main melody and really sticking to that, rather than keeping something like a progressive set of more modern, or I was going to say modern, but modern contemporary bar-on hits and beats and technique strikes. It's not going to be able to emulate that. It also won't particularly work very well on drums like this because it doesn't make A, much sense, and B, they don't react the same way that a more contemporary, taped off, more chamfered sort of tuning thing, design, geometry on the drum would work. So that's a big deal. And again, I'm only looking at the double-ended playing style. Now, a note about the double-ended playing. Some of the double-ended playing is really beautiful, and he plays it for a few reasons. And one of the ones I like is that because of that double-end rolls, there's just no effort to doing the triples. They just happen. It's easy. You wind it up and slow it down. Wind it up and slow it down. And I like how when you're doing it, you can roll in and roll out way easier than single end. Single end requires you to sort of master some of those odd physics of playing. Because there's 4 or 5 different ways of rolling those triplets. many ways of doing it. Rolling in the double-ended stuff, you just get a sense of control that's easier. It follows the wrist easier. And there's another thing as he's playing. He's using broken kicks. Well, I call them broken kicks because the kick's down here. Broken kick is where you are playing a choked version of it. And for me, playing behind or in front of it muddies it up completely. Bring it back. Some of this is going to be developed by how you tune the drum. Normally I tune this thing lower than how I normally have it set. I usually set it more like Johnny Ringo. I use this drum more so for the bass accompaniments. But for that sort of playing, that very dry, that sort of playing. Or if you're someone who's able to do the whole Tommy Hayes thing. Which I'm not a particular fan of, but it's nailing the simplicity of playing and keeping it regular. There's a saying in some forms of Buddhism and some Zen forms of Buddhism where it's called keep it to the spine. And the spine is that steady set of accents in this case. And you come out, you deviate, you come back. But you don't flourish too much out there. And you don't over-embellish it, and you come back. What I like about Colm Murphy's playing is that it reiterates the simplicity of what session playing is about. You follow the melody, you accent and accompany the melody, and you help the melody along. You keep it relatively simple, you don't overdo it. And generally, keeping things simple often makes things work and sound very, very well. So, mainly because in this case, I believe that because the role of Bodhran, at least in a more, and I use the term with a big fat quotation mark, traditional form of playing, is that it works better for that sort of sound setup and that sort of expectation of the music. And I underline the word expectation. You are expected to accompany without flourishment, to make things work. That is not the case if you're trying to play for, say, like if you watch a lot of John Kelly stuff, he's accompanying, but he's got quite a bit of flourish. Or some of the stuff that Ronan O'Snowdy does, or Robbie Walsh, a lot of embellishments that do go off and then come back again. But that's because the balance of the group is not a big session in the same way. It's their own sort of more modern contemporary take and progressive playing sets on the context of that music. A really good example of that is watching John Kelly play with Damien O'Kane, the Damien O'Kane Trio. If you want a good one, YouTube Trip to Portugal, perfect example. But again, keep in mind that's all single end, bundle tipper playing. So keep in mind, watch Colm Murphy's stuff and Seamus O'Kane's playing to understand more about keeping it simple, keeping it regular. And what's beautiful about Colm Murphy's is that it's highly percussive. Seamus O'Kane's is highly tonal because he has a lot of this boom, ba-doom, like a Seamus O'Kane sound by comparison. Would if I can try to emulate this before I run out of time to shoot the video. How could I do this? So I'm trying to get a pattern in my head for it. Okay, so maybe something like a hornpipe. Seamus O'Kane's a little more like. That sort of thing. Colm Murphy is probably closer to. Something more than that. And again, I apologize because the two use diametrically opposite types of bodhrán playing, as well as diametrically opposites in design. Way more traditional on one side, heavier skin, way more thin skin and bouncy sort of sound with a taped head for Mr. O'Kane. So that would be neat in the future if I did something with a Seamus O'Kane style of playing. I can't play like him. I've tried for years and can't get it. Maybe I should cover a little bit of the stuff that I can do to show tricks of the trade and whatnot for that. But that's what I'm talking about with the simplicity, the regularity, and the percussive styles of Colm Murphy. So someone always worth watching if you need a good reminder of what good session playing is about. Simple, effective, not too much flourish, and it's regular, not too much deviation and roll. So hopefully this is helpful. This will end the thing with Colm Murphy. In the future, we're sticking with double-ended playing, and hopefully I'll be able to bring... I have a review coming up. I'm going to shoot it right after this, actually, on the next product review. So until then, I will see you later. Bye.